5 revolutionary Roman writers. Today, I'm going to talk about 5 of my favourite Latin authors, especially ones that I think have been super influential. Number 1, of course, has to be Virgil. Perhaps best known as the Roman answer to Homer, he is one of the most influential writers that we can study today. First of all, before he got famous, I suppose, he was writing bucolic poetry. And that's poetry about the countryside and being a farmer and falling in love in the country. He has the eclogues and the Georgics, and both of them are fantastic. It's got wonderful descriptions and sensory imagery of the countryside in Italy, and it really brings to life what it was like to be in that place and time. He's also responsible for one of the most amazing pieces, in my opinion, of Roman literature that we have today, the Aeneid. This is his epic poem, and that's why I've called it verbose verse, as he uses almost 10,000 lines of Latin poetry to write the story of Aeneas. It's about a refugee from Troy travelling to Italy to found what is going to become the Roman race. So it's very influential for the Romans about their own mythic history, but it's also important for us, especially for Augustan propaganda, the first emperor. He is a master of messaging. So the first emperor, Augustus, had a man called Maecenas on his side, who was the patron of many poets, and Virgil was one of those poets. That means that Maecenas would ask him to sort of support the emperor through his poetry, help to give the message that the emperor wanted to give. But actually, Virgil died before he finished it, and he asked for it to be burnt on his deathbed. Thank goodness no one listened to him, because we would not have one of my favourite pieces of Latin text, the Aeneid. So the eclogues, the Georgics, and the Aeneid. Personally, I think Virgil is one of the most influential writers of all time, but especially of the Roman period. 2, of course, has to be Cicero. He is known for his incredible legal speeches in the courts of Rome. He was a fantastic orator, a fantastic speaker, one of the best lawyers in Rome, especially after he defeated a guy called Hortensius, who was the best lawyer in Rome at the time. And Cicero really became the person that you would want on your side if you were being tried for any misdemeanors that you may or may not have committed. He was also a prolific letter writer, and we have many of his letters because he wrote in order for them to be published. And so they are so fascinating because they tell us about the life of a Roman governing a province. They also tell us about the political tensions that are going on in Rome at the time of his life, which is one of the most interesting periods, the rise and fall, I suppose, of the First Triumvirate and therefore of the Republic of Rome. And he's also talking to some of his best friends, so giving us a really interesting insight into everyday life. But of course, for Cicero, he's also of political importance, massive political importance, which is absolutely fascinating. His opinions on things are very strong, especially on some of the people that he's prosecuting. So his In Verrem, one of his most famous texts, is against a corrupt governor, Verres. This is an astounding one, but also his Philippics against Mark Antony are an absolutely savage character assassination. My students love it. He uses the most wild accusations to discredit Mark Antony, and it is masterful. So Cicero is definitely up there on my list of revolutionary Roman writers. Some of my students think he is slightly too critical, and they think his sentences can run slightly long. Can you see that I'm influenced immensely by Cicero? Yes, you can, because my sentences are far too long. But let's move on. Number 3 has to be Julius Caesar. I don't think I can have not included him. The reason, for me, is that he writes popular publications. He wrote about his military campaigns in language that people could understand. Never mind Cicero with his long, highfalutin sentences. Caesar writes in clear, concise, short sentences. The texts themselves are quite long, but people can understand the sentences. He's not necessarily writing for the super high class. He's almost writing for the middle class who have a little bit of time on their hands, or the upper middle class, which gives him massive political support amongst the people of Rome, because they can understand what he is doing while on campaign. They feel like he is writing to them. To be honest, I got a bit carried away with the rule of 3 here. Again, this is Cicero influencing me. I've put in dictatorial dialogues, and for that, I feel like I needed to put the word dictator in, as Caesar was dictator for life, and that is part of the reason that he was assassinated in 44 BC. But I do think that Caesar, on the whole, especially as a British person, is so important because he is the person who tried and actually failed to conquer Britain for the first time. He gives us a really interesting insight into the Druids and the shape of Britain and how Romans thought about this tiny little island way out of their empire that eventually would become a tiny province on the far reaches. And he was the first one to try and conquer Britain. So for me, I think Caesar is fabulous. And his narratives are so interesting. He gives so much about the war, especially his own wars with Pompey the Great. I also really like that he refers to himself in the third person. He says, Caesar did this, Caesar fought this battle, Caesar won an amazing war. And you just sit there and think, that's you, which I really enjoy. So Caesar is on my list. Number 4 has to be Tacitus. Now, people don't really like Tacitus, but I do, mainly because of the subject matter that his books cover. He wrote the Annals of Rome, the histories of Rome, and they are analytical in a way. People say they're quite biased, and yes, they are. Every writer is biased, but Tacitus especially makes me very happy because he wrote about absolute intrigue in the palace. Such scandal, such horrendous stories that he writes. But his account of what the emperors, especially Nero, for example, gets up to, are incredible. Assassinations, murder plots, affairs, incest, anything you want, you name it, and Tacitus will have written about it. I have a really soft spot in my heart for Tacitus because he was my A-level set text, but I do think he's worth it if you do go and have a chance to read some Tacitus. Make sure you pick a good book because he really gets across this hysteria that can go on when absolute power goes to people's heads. And finally, I couldn't get away without talking about one of the romance poets, so I'm going to talk about Ovid. He's definitely in the category of risque romance. He definitely pushes the boundaries of what it is acceptable to write about. He basically gives a cheat sheet on how to pick up women at public events. He says you should definitely have affairs, how you should get out of people's houses when their husband re-enters, how to draw people away from their husbands. Now, this is all at a time when the emperor was trying to bring in morality laws and stop people doing things like this. So Augustus, the emperor, actually banished Ovid. And Ovid mentions that he wrote a poem and made an error. People have said that this is his ars amatoria, which is his amorous art, the art of being a lover. And therefore he's possibly banished for these very illicit imaginations that he has on how he might pick up women. In modern culture, we consider Ovid to sometimes be quite problematic with the things that he says, but you can't forget that in Rome, he was actively being problematic. He was being problematic for the emperor, and that is why he was banished. He also wrote the Heroides, which are beautiful poems. They are from the point of view of heroines of Greek and Roman myths and legends, which is very unusual in Roman poetry and Roman texts. Really interesting to read if you get a chance. So I do really like Ovid, and I think he should be in here in one of my top 5 revolutionary Roman writers. These are my 5. I'm really interested to know who yours are, if you have any differences, if you think it is scandalous that I have missed someone out, or you think one of those definitely shouldn't be on there, if maybe you've studied them and you do not agree with me. This is my opinion of who the top 5 revolutionary Roman writers should be. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Bambasbat.